Hello YouTube, hello world, hello Diego. I am still debating as to whether or not I even want to upload this kind of content, but I think this may be just a video log that I'm going to start to do because I don't know what else to really do right now. For those of you who don't know, I'm a young fellow, not too young, I'm 26 years old, so I have some degree of life experience. I'm not as novice as say when I was 20 years old, right? But obviously I'm not a 40-year-old person or 50 or 60, 70, 80, 90, right? So I have very long ways to go and I still have a lot of youth in me. But I gotta also say that I'm not as childlike as I was even a few years back pre-COVID. And I'll say that COVID was definitely a life-changing experience for me, as I'm sure it has been for many. But one of the things I decided to do during COVID was that I was so miserable during the lockdown that I basically said fuck it, and I went out and I left my home state of Maryland, and I've gone out and explored more of the United States. I wanted adventure. I've always been someone who's yearned adventure, and in fact I've wanted to travel the world a lot more, and I think hopefully more videos in the future can be ones that can have me traveling the world. But I'm here in the US and I drove out to Texas during COVID, and I came to realize simply how big of a country the United States really is. It's huge. I don't think I'm not really convinced that everybody in the US, at least where I grew up, really can fathom the scale of the United States. I mean, if it were not for cars, trying to get through this country on foot would take a long time. And I'm a big World War II history fan, so I use World War II as kind of my anchor in my historical analysis of the world. A, because it's relatively recent compared to, let's say, ancient history. B, in the framework as an American, I can tell you that World War II was a major catalyst in American society, both through technology, through culture. It really propelled the United States into, well, that was like a bug or something there, into becoming basically a true global superpower. It already had been growing its reputation throughout the Industrial Revolution. We're talking 19th century, right? A lot of innovation was going on in the United States, but so were other nations too, right? We had France, eventually Germany became a big catalyst as well. But World War II would come around, and one of the few nations that would come out as a victor, arguably the only nation that really came out as a victor of World War II, economically at least, was the United States. So when you're out here in the United States and you're driving on these roads and you're using these Ford-like vehicles, right? Using these, gasoline-fed powered machines. This technology, most of that technology stems from World War II. And a lot has changed since then, of course, but I would say that the real catalyst began with World War II, right? Aircraft, the history of aviation was dramatically changed in World War II. And the Cold War, the whole nature of the Cold War was basically a product of World War II, as the United States wasn't the only superpower in the world. And Cold War ended in the 1990 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, and about 30 years later, here we are. So in my mind, World War II is a really relevant moment in American history to this day. SAT exams, public education, Social Security, a lot of programs that the United States uses with its citizens all originate back to World War II. And so I really do appreciate walking and exploring. Well, right now I'm walking, but I really do appreciate exploring the United States through the lens of World War II, because it really helps me get a better feel for how the culture has changed over time. And so yeah, the United States is a huge place, and I'm actually incentivized because of my fascination for World War II history and everything between then and now to better understand American history. So perhaps, before I make a full trip to, say, Europe, which is somewhere I really want to go, because there's all kinds of World War II history out there as well, or maybe make a trip to go out to Latin America, which has this hybrid of both World War II history, right? I mean, the whole history of the Latin America, once the United States was a global power, was one in which Latin America was trying to find its sense of identity. And this is still an ongoing process today in Latin America. But, you know, you've got all these kind of dictators. You have the history of Cuba, right? Colombia, you know, and many other countries. All kinds of civil wars. The cartel is a very complicated thing that's a little bit more recent, but it's a direct product of the growth in the American economy and basically the demand of cocaine and other drugs, unfortunately. And so America is still a very relevant empire today, and I will call it an empire. But like every other human civilization, I think it would be unfair to say that the United States is an evil empire, because I think the reality, and I am going to rant, by the way, in this video, so I hope you enjoy, but the reality is that I'm pretty certain that almost every single major powerful nation or powerful civilization in human history had this empirical quality about them. They had this ability to conquer, they had this ability to defeat enemies. And so I don't want to sit here and simply bash on the American empire and say that it's pure evil. But at the same time, it would also be foolish for me to say that America is the greatest place in the world. But one thing I really have to say about that is that compared to, let's say, other major empires, industrial empires that the United States was competing with, the United States seems to have this philosophy, which was established in the Enlightenment period, and it has a lot to do with liberal rights and civil rights and rights of the individual. There's something about that seems to have some genuine value to the world. And a lot of those ideas are actually ideas that were seeded by Christianity and Christian values. And so I am walking right now. I'm in Tennessee right now, and I'm hiking through the UT Arboretum. I think that might be the University of Tennessee Arboretum. I'm not sure what the UT stood for. But, you know, I'm curious to know, you know, what's the significance of Christian values? Because nowadays, you know, a lot of people would probably make the argument that Christianity is failing. And when you look around, there's a lot of evidence to believe that Christianity is in some sense failing, right? I mean, you got a lot of lonely women out here, a lot of lonely men, both, a lot of lonely people in general. And I would say that the nature of the family unit is steadily collapsing, or just changing at a really unprecedented rate. So many different groups of people are now mixing. I am a mixed child myself. You know, I come from two different ethnic groups. I don't like to use the word race. I like to use the word ethnic because it seems to be more relevant to other times in human history. I don't want to simply paint it as black versus white, because the reality is the genetic code is a lot more diverse than that. It's not simply black genes and white genes. You've got some Indian genes, all kinds of quote-unquote Indian genes in there as well, aka Native American. Latinos are extremely diverse group of people. All kinds of different ethnicities there as well. You've got Asian genes being mixed in, right? And even amongst groups like quote-unquote white people, you have a very large diversity of genes as well there. Italians, Scottish, Irish, Germanic, right? And all these groups seem to have, at some point, seen each other as different because they've been fighting for a very long time. And don't get me started with other places like Africa, where the ethnic diversity is immense. Yet here in America, we probably say, oh, they're all black people. But that's not the reality. The reality is that culture, religion, language, all tie together to help create these senses of identity. And so, these are just my thoughts kind of going off right now, but I'm really grateful these days to be out here and thinking about these kind of things and having the chance to explore America. And I have to say, if you're out here, definitely get a chance to check out Tennessee. The Tennessee lands are pretty friendly, as far as I can tell. I don't see any fire ants like I did out in Texas, so you can sit down and not really be worried about fire ants biting you. It reminds me a lot of Maryland, actually. But the thing I love most about this region is that it's very hilly and very mountainous. And so you end up with this very beautiful diversity of terrain, and you get some really nice mountain views. I love it when it rains. It rained here the last few days, and it was absolutely gorgeous seeing the fog through the mountains. And also the people here are, for the most part, at least on the surface, relatively friendly. I don't know, I'm still trying to put my finger on where that comes from. It may come from some very conservative values where, you know, there's this kind of traditional respect that goes on in public. But compared to, let's say, Baltimore or perhaps the other places, I was in West Virginia. I've spent some time in West Virginia or Virginia. I found that I usually get a lot more hostility from people on the East Coast than I do out here. When I was out in Texas, I felt that people were a lot colder in general. And as far as Georgia, Georgia seemed relatively, also had the southern element to it as well. So this is definitely the South, and maybe call it the Southern hospitality perhaps. And I really don't want to try to generalize too much. Oh wow, there's a spider right here. I don't know if you can see that, but it's one crazy looking spider. It's got horns and everything on it. Quite a beautiful spider. I don't know if you can, if the camera even catches that. Sorry if you don't even see it. If I change the angle, I don't know. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. I'm gonna have to see my video later, but I'm definitely getting caught in its web, and I'm trying to walk in a way that I can get past it. Oh, okay. Not scared of spiders. Right. So, long story short, I think nowadays, I think the best title I can give America is the land of lost tribes. And I'm really beginning to believe that to ever be more true. Because it's not just the previous tribes, the pre-Columbus tribes that I'm speaking of. I'm speaking about the modern day tribes as well. You've got all kinds of clans of people from all over the world coming to America and trying to figure out what to do out here. And the beautiful thing is that this place is extremely innovative. I find it very impressive. The drive for innovation that America seems to have, and the history of America is one of innovation. I mean, the reason why the United States defeated, I will say, Native Americans was, technologically speaking, due to the revolver, right? That is probably one of many ingredients. I'm definitely overgeneralizing here. But we have to, I think it's important to think about, you know, what does it take to create a set of laws of the land that incentivize people to innovate on their own terms, innovate, give them a sense of autonomy. Because I definitely will say this, I've had other videos where I've talked about this, but one concept that I do believe to be relatively true is this idea of finding our passion or finding our life task. And I think part of my life task is to be some kind of educator of sorts. But you know, it's kind of hard to be an educator when I enjoy being a smartass, right? And I say that jokingly, but I don't want to come off as someone who's like super arrogant and knows exactly what the fuck they're talking about, because the reality is that I don't entirely know what I'm talking about. The way my mind works and the way I think is like I'm always getting little strings of information, and they all seem to come together, coagulate together into much bigger ideas. And I'm a deep thinker, and my ideas are relatively deep. So it's really hard to put my ideas into simple terms at times, because I'm trying to paint a big picture, but there's so many little details that are important to think about along the way. But definitely lost my train of thought there. Sorry about that. But I was talking about land of lost tribes, I was talking about innovation, and I was talking about what does it take to create laws of the land that can help people create a sense of freedom, essentially. And finding your passion, finding your life task, I think is a really central goal. It's a worthy goal to have, in one's life. Find what is it that you can do that makes you a fulfilled human being. And under the assumption that you're not hurting anybody, right? Under the assumption that you're not killing anybody and you're not doing anything malicious to anyone. And I guess in some sense this is a Christian idea, because when I think of the garden of Adam and Eve, I think of a place where essentially a higher entity has given man and woman access to almost unlimited resources, unlimited potential, right? And the gardens seem to me to be some kind of symbolism towards unlimitedness. And so when you look at history, I say that because in history is usually fought over resources. It's fought over territory. We men fight over women, for God's sakes. And often these wars are fought over resources, it seems like. And there's a lot of pride and ego that goes behind showing who's the most dominant player on the field, if you understand what I'm getting at. And so, having said that, I can't help but feel that, you know, a world where every single person can figure out what's their life task and do it in a way where they don't have to necessarily bully another human being in order to feel that sense of accomplishment, I think is indeed possibly a path towards a better world or a better humanity. That's kind of my hypothesis of sorts, and maybe it's too good to be true. You know, as Alan Watts would say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so, you know, for all I know, this idea, these idealisms may actually cause more problems than they may help. I really have no idea, but I do want to hope for the best. And when I look at a deeper writings, when I hear about the kingdom of Jesus, I can't help but feel that that's the message. The message was to create a better world, a more harmonious world. And so what is the formula for a life task? What is the formula for passion? And there is some chemistry to back this up, but basically we want to find something that can basically satisfy three chemical needs that we need as human beings in order to feel good. The three chemicals are oxytocin, serotonin, and adrenaline, I believe. Or excuse me, not adrenaline, dopamine. That's oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. And I saw a really great video from a doctor, and he said that we want to have a car, which is an abbreviation, that can take us to our road to success, our road to passion, our road to finding a life task, in a sense. And the abbreviation stands for community, autonomy, and reward. And the idea here is that we want to do something that can check mark all three things. So, do I feel like I belong in a community? If yes, then that's going to make me feel good. Because human beings, as one of my therapists told me, human beings we are designed as communal creatures. We work together. We hunt together, we eat together, we live together, we fuck together. That's something that humans do. And so when you have that sense of community, that's so important to feeling like you're worthy of being a person. And the chemical that our brain will produce when we feel like we are in a state of community is oxytocin. And if you guessed that, by the way, then you're absolutely an intelligent person and good for you. Because if you haven't noticed, one thing that I've also found to be quite consistent across the United States is the drug epidemic. We have a serious drug problem across America. Different generations had different drug problems, right? The black community back in, I believe it was 60s, 70s, 80s of sorts, or maybe 80s. Might be mixing up my decades there a bit. They had crack problem. They had a major crack problem, and that was indeed, I believe, absolutely indeed, planted by the government in some capacity. For whatever reason, it was likely done maliciously, and maybe it wasn't the entire government, but it was certain people in power that did things to hurt other communities. And so you had the crack problem. So there's that. Unfortunately, that was a dark time for black America. Black America was doing really well after World War II because of the work and the skilled labor, and then crack kicked in, caused all kinds of damage. Well, now we're seeing another wave. We've been seeing another wave of drugs. This one is mostly heroin. This is a mostly heroin problem. Although it's not only heroin, there's a few others, meth, and you could even classify alcoholism as another major drug that all groups suffer from, including the Native Americans. Has destroyed entire Native American communities. But I think the main one, the one that I see that really cuts deep, is something like heroin. And when I was out in Baltimore, big heroin problem. Even out here in Tennessee or even Texas, you see a lot of homeless people, and most of the time they're on heavy drugs like something like heroin, where all it takes is one hit and you're gone. And to give you a story, when I was out in San Marcos, I was living, had a nice roommate. He was a cop, good guy. And at one point, I was chilling out there, and I was so lonely at the time. This was like at the peak of COVID. I was super lonely, no social life, nothing. And I was living in an apartment complex, pretty much a ghetto one. I mean, it was very cheap. I call it the ghetto, but really it's just poverty-stricken American apartment complex. And over there, I actually met a kid with a beautiful soul, really kind guy. I almost want to say that he was a Jesus of sorts. And he was on heroin. And I didn't realize it at the time when I befriended him. Like, you know, something was off about him and I couldn't tell what it was. But when I started to realize that his clothes were dirty, every time I saw him again and again and again, his clothes only got dirtier and dirtier. He recently got kicked out of his house, fighting with his family. His mother and his stepdad was apparently an asshole, and he had a really nasty fight with the guy, and basically he got kicked out. But he was living in the streets. His clothes were getting dirty, and the heroin was kind of his way of finding peace in the world. And he loved the world, but he was also high as fuck a lot of the times in order to really love. And he was a lover, man. Probably a little bi, as far as I could tell. And we certainly vibed. And he actually had some pretty good music. And shout out to Smiling Friends, because that little Latino guy who's like, "Get out of me head! Get out of me head!" I literally met that fella. It was so funny because he had a SoundCloud and everything. So big shout out to them for making me actually smile. But this kid, I didn't realize like he you know what was up with him, and he finally told me that he was on heroin, and I simply told him like, "Yo, man, you know, as much as I would love you to stay in my home, you know, I let him shower in my home, slept in my home one night, but I told him, hey man, I can't have you keep coming back like this if we're not going to try to fix this problem." And he got mad. Basically, he felt disrespected, which I could understand. And long story short, we basically broke off our communication. And my big concern actually was, like, you know, if I start bring him into my family and everything, like, probably not the best role model for my cousins. And I just felt like I couldn't be friends with him because of it. So it's a real problem, and I know a lot of people are suffering from it. And heroin, the reason why this is relevant to the 3 chemicals that allow you to create your passion or find your passion, is because it is an opium-based drug. And the other, Oxytocin, also happens to be related to opium as well. And by the way, I find it very fascinating. I think I have a bug in my eye right now. Oh my god. Is it there? I can't tell, but my eye feels a little irritated. They say to spit to help with that. But, there goes another one. Fucking bugs, man. Should have brought my glasses. Sorry about that. Let's see. Sorry about that. But, I may have to edit this out. But Oxytocin, heroin, they're related to opium. Opium is a plant. Check out the Opium Wars when you want to learn more about the history of China and why China is so kind of wants to almost re-honor itself as a world leading power. Is because pretty much the Europeans really messed them up with the Opium War essentially. But that's the nature of empires and the nature of wars fundamentally. I find it very fascinating that recently the United States pulled out of Afghanistan, and I don't know if my stats are correct, but Afghanistan was, I believe, one of the world's leading exporting places of opium in the world. And so I find it incredibly fascinating that I might actually turn around very soon. Yeah, I'm thinking we're going to start turning around. And I think I have a few more things to say before I finish up this video. But I find it incredibly fascinating that recently the United States pulled out of Afghanistan, and I really want to know if there's any connection with the Americans' almost panicked withdrawal from Afghanistan. It was not a tactical withdrawal whatsoever. It didn't seem like it, at least. And any correlation with that and the underbelly drug market, global drug market that is going on, certainly going on between the U.S. and Latin America, and perhaps there's very much going on between the U.S. and Afghanistan. And when you look at the opium epidemic, it just seems like, wow, I wonder if there's a connection there. That is definitely one for the conspiracy theorists to investigate. So with that said, having that sense of community is so important. It's so important. It's such a fundamental human need. And I'm convinced, at least for myself, that because of COVID, because of the lockdown, I kind of became from introvert to extrovert. Because after that, I really finally realized how important it is for me to have friendship and company and just have a good conversation with at least one person a day, even if they're a stranger, because of that just fundamental need of a feeling like I belong with a group of people. And so I can tell you that being somewhat of a nomad these days, I can tell you that it's such a blessing when I ever get to meet a new person and vibe with them. And there goes a beautiful deer. There goes a spirit deer, for all I know. Maybe her babies are probably not too far behind. She looks like a mama. But long story short, oxytocin, very important to have. Very important to have. As a chemical, and so rather than having to take pills to, let's say, provide that need, I feel like there are ways that our brains can naturally produce those said chemicals by simply having company. Another side rant, one of the reasons why I've smoked so much marijuana throughout my years at university was because of how lonely I felt. I was completely lonely at university. And I can tell you now that if I got a hug a day, even one hug, one good, real-ass hug, not one of them fake-ass hugs, real-ass hug a day, I probably would have felt less the need to smoke. And thankfully, I was smoking marijuana, grows from the earth, it's a natural plant. And I'm not really smoking something as potent as opium, thank God. That also comes from the earth too. But, I didn't take any oxycodone pills or anything like that, or heroin, none of that. But I can certainly empathize with people who feel the need to take a drug to feel good, because it gives that inner warmth, right? So that's the first one, is oxycodone. That's the C in the abbreviation for car. Again, the title back together. Like I said, these are long thoughts, so bear with me here. But the C is for community, right? What is the A now? The A stands for autonomy, right? In a world where we all have ego, we all carry an ego, we all carry a sense of identity, every one of us has their own body. I feel like there is a value in feeling like you are in control of your body, yes? Whether male or female, or anything in between, if you identify as something in between. Or beyond, perhaps. Maybe you're from an alien. I'm from Jupiter, myself. But that said, A is autonomy. The ability to do things freely and do things comfortably is the way I see it. And do things on your own time and in your own terms. And if you have if you've grown up with parents And you know, you've butt heads with your parents a lot of times. I'm sure often as a young teen, it comes from that feeling of I'm not as free as I want to be. So autonomy is really important. The chemical that is responsible for autonomy, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I don't mix these up, but it's going to be serotonin. So I don't know the real nature of serotonin. Maybe I got to do more research and talk about this at a later time. But based off of the video I saw, serotonin is the drug responsible for autonomy. You basically get rewarded for trying, for exploration. And if you are a Nintendo fan like myself, and you've played games like Zelda, and you're this little character, this little Link character, and you're running around and you open up that treasure chest, damn, it feels good to fucking get that gold ruby. I'm telling you now, that shit was fucking baller. Pretty nice view, by the way, too. There's some power lines going through. But serotonin, autonomy, rewarded for exploration. And that's the key thing, is that we need to have reward systems if we want to keep doing new things, right? When you want to build a new habit, if you want to build a new skill, you want to build a new sense of character for yourself, repetition and practice are really important things. And so part of that process is that you can't be a dictator and just start yelling at yourself and telling yourself you're not good enough, because that doesn't really work. And there's Jordan Peterson talks about this really well, right? You can't be a dictator. You kind of have to be your own life coach. You almost have to be your own parent. You have to give yourself encouragement and give yourself a way to feel like you're making progress and reward yourself when you do. So serotonin is that drug. And then I think I've actually messed up this whole explanation apparently. The last one is reward. And I think reward is dopamine. And that's basically instant gratification. Different from autonomy, because autonomy I think is a little more subtle. But when you eat that piece of sugar, let's say, or when you have sex, right, or when you do something that your physical body immediately appreciates, you basically get instantly rewarded. That's how I at least see it, right? And the chemical for that is dopamine. And so whenever you play a video game and you get that instant satisfaction for getting a kill in Call of Duty, or when you get the attention from someone that you really like, that to me is a sign of some kind of instant gratification, and dopamine is the chemical responsible for that. And so it's different than autonomy, because although serotonin gives you that reward as well, I don't think it's as immediate or as spontaneous as dopamine. And so that's pretty much what I remember. This is all kind of off the dome, but I hope that makes sense, right? We have a car. C stands for community, A for autonomy, and R for reward, or better yet, instantly rewarded. And if you can find an activity, society, that gives you all three things, well, guess what? You basically have found your passion. And I tell you now, making these videos and just sharing my thoughts of the world to as many people as I can, and possibly even getting an audience that can listen to my crazy ass, is definitely giving me all three. Because I have people who can hear me out. I like to be heard, as many others do. I feel good when I'm heard. I like the sense of freedom that I get in thinking as a free man. And I also like the feeling of, I guess, getting rewarded. I'm not sure how I'm going to get rewarded yet. Ideally, I can make a platform big enough one day to actually keep this sustained, have this as a source of sustainable income for me. But as Gary Vee pointed out, don't focus on the money, focus on the results, focus on the craft, focus on the product in a sense. And so, if I ever do have this thing pick up, it's going to be a donation-based thing. This is up to you, y'all, the audience, to decide if I am rich or broke, basically. Either way, I have other plans for giving me money. And these days, obviously I want money. Obviously I want to be fucking Andrew Tate level dopeness. But part of me also realizes that there's more to life than money. Someone very incredible, super successful businessman, Alex Hormozy. Big shout out to him. He's a complete metaphysical philosopher all the way. And he says it very simply: money solves money problems, and that's it. And so in a society where we are just kind of obsessed with money, money is abstract, and money, is useful when you need it, right? We're talking about like physical health, right? We're talking about, are you in a safe place? Do you have shelter? Do you have a roof over your head? Are you able to afford any kind of medical needs, right? And one thing that is certain is that our society today has not provided that basic need for everybody. And I think another more abstract category is mental health needs as well. So mental health is a very new field to study, but it's one that seems to be very relevant across the world. And I'll tell you now, having had a few therapists, the biggest gift, or the biggest thing that I gained from talking to them was this feeling of being heard. And so it kind of ties back to the community idea as well. So speaking of, someone built a really nice bench here. A really nice, really just solid bench. And look at that, they even used, wooden dimples, wooden screws. I'm not even sure how that works, because I have considered picking up trade work, but I'm not exactly sure which one I want to do. I've considered, I have the intelligence, I think, to do other work, but do I have the willpower to get myself to follow orders from another person? So these days I am looking for an apprentice. And heck, if you see this video, definitely let me know if you would be interested in working together and talking about things while we work, because as someone who does appreciate the hard sciences, I can tell you now that I've very much appreciated the pool of knowledge accessible through the internet and through education. And so anything I can do to continue learning about the natural world, learning about the architecture of God, if you will, and I guess if you're an atheist, just learning about the architecture of the cosmos, ultimately, there's just so much more to know, and big shout out to physicists and chemists and just Star Wars, you know what I mean? Like, there's just all kinds of cool gadgets. I'm still waiting for us to have the anti-gravity hoverboards. And for all we know, the government already has anti-gravity machines, but we don't know anything about that yet because it's very top secret. So again, shout out to Joe Rogan for just getting people to think more about just the subtle mysteries of our culture. We still have a lot. But ultimately, the whole point of this video was to get a lot of my thoughts out of my mind. And I love to talk. I love to talk to myself all freaking day. I've been doing these voice recordings to myself all day long, kind of as a way to give myself some kind of journal entry. And I do understand why people keep diaries, because diaries are just a really great way to think out loud, and it's a really great way to kind of have a conversation with yourself. And I can tell you now, by doing this recording and talking to y'all, and just for anyone who ends up watching this video, right? Like, it's not like it's a guarantee that anyone's even going to see the videos, but I have a feeling that at least one person on YouTube is going to see this video besides myself. I've uploaded videos in the past, and I would get like 5-10 views. So heck, that's more than one person, and then simply myself. And I can just simply tell you now that if you get a chance, just wow, look, there's another spider here. Big spider. Oh, the spider just fell. But it looked like a ladybug almost. I'm gonna walk around. Hopefully I don't kick the web. But yeah, if you get a chance, if you're someone out here, oh God, wow, I've had my Grubhub on this whole time too. Oopsies. Well, I'm back again. Video got cut there for a second because I am trying to make some income while I'm out here still looking for work. And so I am going to do some food deliveries. And so my phone app kind of had a little interference there. But long story short, if you're someone out here and you're feeling really lonely, right? And if you're feeling just completely alone, my biggest advice I can give you, beyond the car idea, the road to success, or better yet, the road to finding your life task, which is one way of seeing success, right? Because we often say, oh, I want to be successful, but we don't have a clear definition of what success is. I think that the car concept is a really easy concept to understand, relatively easy to understand, and so one that has a worthy kind of fluid model that you can apply to almost any lifestyle that you choose, right? And again, this is one under the assumption that you're not killing anybody, or you're not intentionally harming or doing something malicious towards another person, right? Otherwise, I mean, you know, we open up a whole nother cans of worms there that I'm sure incredible writers and thinkers can tell you about. Shout out to Dostoevsky. But he wrote a book called Notes of the Underground. Very, very powerful book, and I highly recommend it. It's a short story if you get a chance. And it basically talks about negativity, and almost like a negative form of nihilism in a sense. At least that's how I interpreted it. But yeah, if you're out here, whether it's journal entering, whether it's audio recordings, or even now videos, I highly encourage anyone to write things down and write your thoughts out on paper, or make a recording, because what you're doing is that you're actually kind of having a mirror conversation with your own self. And I think the reality is that we human beings are a lot more complicated than we want to admit at times. And when it comes to emotions, and when it comes to the sense of being a self, I think the reality is that we have multiple selves within ourselves, right? I mean, you hear about someone who's bipolar, right? That's someone who seems to have large difficulty controlling their mood swings. But if you're someone like me who can get irritated by simply driving in traffic, you know, all our emotional states are kind of different states of selves as well. And so I think by simply having an audience, even if it's yourself to talk to, it's kind of like playing a game of tennis by yourself, or playing a game of ping pong like Tom Hanks was doing in that film. What's the name of the film with Bubba? But you know, that's that movie, and he's playing ping pong all day long. He was able to have a deep connection with himself, and he was able to find activities that allowed him to discover himself in very special ways. So I think I've pretty much said everything I wanted to say today. Obviously, stay tuned for more videos. I really would love to make more history videos. I have to get better organized with that, and kind of get the balls to like do the video editing and do the research. I'm actually completely lost right now, so I may not even be able to do my food delivery. But I can tell you now that walking through a forest like this, thinking out loud, sharing as much wisdom as I can, even if I'm a complete Dumbo at times, that's okay, because we all make mistakes, and making mistakes is part of being a human being. The most important thing, like Robert Kiyosaki would say, is identifying the third side of a coin. Every coin has two sides. There's always two sides to a story, if you will. There's always a third side to a coin. And if you can understand the paradigm or paradox of an event and see it as both good and bad, it allows you then to, I don't know, see the matrix, see things more clearly, and better understand just the fundamental paradox